we are what the future is for women.
Yeah.
And I look at having my daughters, and
There are stories in Hollywood that everyone thinks they know. The headlines, the tabloid covers, the late-night jokes. They paint a picture so familiar that most people stopped asking questions a long time ago. Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher. The older woman, the younger man, the scandalous age gap, the dramatic collapse. The world thought it had that story figured out the moment it began. But here's what the world did not know. Behind those red carpet smiles and carefully managed public appearances, something far more complicated was unfolding. A miscarriage that was hidden from the public for years. A marriage slowly hollowed out by grief, betrayal, and desperate attempts to hold everything together. And a woman who nearly lost everything: her sobriety, her career, her daughters, and very nearly her life before she found her way back to herself. At 62 years old, Demi Moore is finally telling the full story. And when you hear it from the beginning, the real beginning, you will understand why it took her this long to say it out loud. To understand Demi Moore, you have to go back to a childhood that most people would struggle to survive, let alone grow up and thrive beyond. She was born on November 11, 1962, in Roswell, New Mexico, and from her very first days, stability was something that existed for other people's families, not hers. Her biological father left before she ever had the chance to know him. Her mother, Virginia, was a deeply troubled woman who loved her daughter, but was fighting battles of her own, battles with alcohol, with depression, with an inability to stay in one place or hold one life together for very long. By the time Demi was 14 years old, the family had moved more than 30 times. There was no hometown, no childhood best friend who knew her whole history, no sense of roots or belonging anywhere, just constant motion, constant upheaval, and the quiet understanding that nothing in her world was ever going to be permanent. When she was 12 years old, something happened that no child should ever have to experience. Her mother attempted suicide. Demi found her. She had to reach into her mother's mouth with her own small hands and pull out the pills before they could do their final damage, while her stepfather held the situation together as best he could. That image, a 12-year-old girl literally fighting to keep her mother alive, tells you everything you need to know about how early Demi Moore was forced to grow up, and how deeply that urgency to save the people she loved became wired into her identity. At 15, she suffered what she has described as the most devastating betrayal of her young life. In her 2019 memoir, Inside Out, Moore revealed that her own mother sold access to her, allowed an older man to assault her for $500. She has said that this moment fractured something fundamental inside her, a trust in the adults who were supposed to protect her that never fully repaired itself. For years she carried that wound quietly, not understanding yet how profoundly it would shape every relationship she would ever enter. School offered no escape. She struggled with dyslexia at a time when the condition was poorly understood, and she underwent multiple surgeries on her eyes during her childhood. By the time she was 16, she had dropped out entirely and was living on her own, supporting herself through modeling jobs and, remarkably, debt collection work. At 17, she married a rock musician named Freddie Moore, not out of love, she would later admit, but out of a desperate need to escape the chaos she had grown up inside. She took his last name and made it her own, and it would remain her name long after the marriage ended in 1985, becoming the name the world would eventually know on theater marquees and magazine covers everywhere. What is remarkable about Demi Moore is not that she had a difficult beginning. Many people have difficult beginnings. What is remarkable is that she looked at everything that had been done to her and everything she lacked, and she decided it was not going to be the end of her story. That decision, made by a teenage girl with no money, no education, no stable home, and no one reliably in her corner, is the foundation of everything that came after. Her first serious break came in the early 1980s, when she was cast in the daytime soap opera General Hospital, playing a journalist named Jackie Templeton. More than 1,000 actresses had auditioned for the role. Demi got it. She was earning $750 per episode, which was not much, But it was a beginning, and more importantly, it was proof that she could compete and win at the highest levels of the industry she had chosen to enter. But even as her career was beginning to take shape, she was fighting a private war. Addiction had taken hold of her life. She was partying heavily, sometimes for days at a stretch, and the people around her could see that her talent was in serious danger of being swallowed by her self-destruction. The director Joel Schumacher saw something in her that he refused to let go to waste. When he cast her in St. Elmo's Fire in 1985, he delivered an ultimatum that was also an act of genuine belief: get sober, or lose the part. He arranged for someone to be with her around the clock throughout filming to help her stay on track. She chose sobriety, and St. Elmo's Fire launched her into a different stratosphere entirely. The film made her part of the cultural conversation about young Hollywood in a way that nothing before had. She became associated with a group of young actors the press called the Brat Pack, and while the label was complicated, most of those actors had mixed feelings about it. The attention it brought was undeniable. Doors began opening, roles began coming, and Demi Moore began building a career that would eventually make her one of the most recognizable actresses in the world. Ghost, released in 1990, was the moment everything crystallized. Made on a budget of roughly $22 to $23 million, the film earned over $550 million worldwide, became the highest-grossing movie of that year, and at that point, ranked among the top 3 highest-grossing films ever made. The pottery scene with Patrick Swayze, set to the haunting swell of Unchained Melody, became one of the most replicated and parodied images in cinematic history. Her short haircut in the film triggered a global fashion trend. Women everywhere walked into salons with her picture. What made Ghost particularly extraordinary was its personal dimension for Moore. While her film was sitting at the top of the box office, her then-husband Bruce Willis's film, Die Hard 2, was right behind it. For a brief, extraordinary window, a married couple held the top 2 spots in American cinema simultaneously, something that reportedly did not happen for any other married Hollywood couple for more than 3 decades afterward. From there, she moved through a remarkable string of films. A Few Good Men in 1992, where she held her own opposite Tom Cruise and Jack Nicholson in a film that earned over $240 million worldwide. Indecent Proposal in 1993, which earned nearly $267 million and ignited a national conversation about marriage, desire, and what people will do when desperation meets temptation. Striptease in 1996, for which she became the highest-paid actress in Hollywood history at that time, earning $12.5 million for a role that drew intense criticism and intense fascination in equal measure. And G.I. Jane in 1997, in which she shaved her head on camera, trained alongside actual military personnel, dropped her body fat to 10%, and delivered a performance that showed a completely different dimension of what she was capable of. She has said herself that those 2 films, Striptease and G.I. Jane, represented opposing poles of how the world wanted to see women, and that she got criticized for both of them. Playing a stripper upset certain audiences, playing a soldier upset others. She couldn't win, and the criticism wore on her in ways that she was not yet equipped to handle. She internalized it. It fed the part of her that had always believed somewhere beneath the success and the confidence that she was not quite enough, that something about her was fundamentally broken. That belief would have consequences. Before Ashton Kutcher, there was Bruce Willis. And before Bruce Willis, there was the girl who had never really had a stable home and desperately wanted to build one. Demi met Bruce in 1987 at a film premiere. She was engaged to someone else at the time, actor Emilio Estevez, but the connection between her and Bruce was immediate and undeniable. Within 4 months, they were in Las Vegas for a boxing match, and Bruce proposed. They got married that same night, on November 21, 1987. It was impulsive, it was fast, and for a significant stretch of time it worked. They became one of the defining Hollywood couples of their era. He was ascending with Die Hard. She was becoming one of the most bankable actresses in the industry. Together they had 3 daughters: Rumor, born in 1988, Scout, born in 1991, and Tallulah, born in 1994. By every external measure, they had it all. But careers that big create distance, and they had different visions of what their family life should look like. Bruce, by various accounts, wanted Demi to be more present at home. Demi was in the middle of breaking records and had no intention of stopping. The tension that creates in a marriage, particularly in an industry where both partners are under constant public scrutiny, is the kind that erodes quietly until it doesn't. They separated in 1998 after 11 years together. What happened next was genuinely unusual for Hollywood. They stayed friends. They co-parented together. They showed up for each other's important events. They even attended each other's subsequent weddings. They built what their daughters would later describe as a kind of extended family. Imperfect, complicated, but real. Demi has spoken about how important motherhood became to her during this period in ways that surprised even her. She famously posed nude and visibly pregnant on the cover of Vanity Fair in 1991, a photograph that shocked and captivated the culture in equal measure, and that is now recognized as a landmark image in how pregnancy and the female body are discussed publicly. She had a nursery built on the set of G.I. Jane, so her youngest daughter could be near her during filming. When she and Bruce separated, she made the significant decision to step back from Hollywood and move her family to Idaho, choosing her children's need for a normal life over her own professional momentum. That choice tells you something important about who Demi Moore really is beneath the tabloid headlines. She was willing to walk away from the height of her career, from the industry she had clawed her way into from nothing, because her daughters needed something she had never had herself: consistency, peace, and a mother who showed up. She was 40 years old when she met Ashton Kutcher. He was 25. The night they met at the New York premiere of Charlie's Angels Full Throttle in 2003 was apparently electric in the way that some encounters just are, defying whatever logic or caution or life experience might otherwise intervene. Within 24 hours they had been on a phone call that lasted 8 hours. They talked about their dreams, their philosophies, what they believed about the world, and what they wanted from their lives. It was the kind of conversation that makes you feel like you have known someone for decades in a matter of hours. 2 months later, Ashton proposed. He arranged a midnight picnic on a beach in Santa Barbara and spelled out the words with rose petals. The ring, an Asher-cut diamond worth a reported $250,000, made the news. Almost immediately, the engagement came before most couples would have even had their first serious argument. Within 4 months of meeting, they had moved in together and launched a joint production company. Their first project together, Beauty and the Geek, became a genuine hit. By every visible measure, they were thriving. But there was a private grief that the public did not know about for a long time. 6 months into her pregnancy, Demi suffered a miscarriage. Their daughter, whom they had already named Chaplain Ray, had no heartbeat when detected during a routine appointment on September 23, 2003. Demi was 41 years old. In her memoir, she described this loss as one of the most devastating experiences of her life. She had been sober for nearly 20 years at that point. The miscarriage did not immediately destroy that sobriety, but it planted something dark in her, a grief she could not find language for, a self-blame she could not reason her way out of. She told herself that her occasional drinking and smoking in the very early days of the pregnancy had caused what happened. Whether that was medically accurate mattered less than the fact that she believed it, and that belief became a weight she carried into everything that followed. They tried IVF. They tried other interventions. Nothing worked. The dream of having a child together faded slowly and painfully, and the grief of that fading was something Ashton and Demi processed very differently. In her memoir, she wrote that he tried to support her, but could not fully connect with what she was experiencing. Emotional distance opened between them quietly, gradually, but unmistakably. In her effort to hold the marriage together, Demi agreed to things she later said she should not have. She has written that Ashton asked for, and she agreed to threesomes arrangements that she went along with because she wanted to make him happy, But that left her feeling ashamed and disconnected from her own sense of self. She framed this in her memoir not as victimhood, but as the behavior of a woman who had never quite learned that she was allowed to say no to someone she loved, who kept believing that if she could just give enough, be enough, accommodate enough, the relationship would survive. They married in September 2005 in a private ceremony at their Beverly Hills home with around 100 guests. Bruce Willis was there. Demi's daughters read heartfelt letters to Ashton during the ceremony. He gave each of the 3 girls a Cartier love bracelet. Bruce was reportedly moved to tears. For a while it looked like it might work. Ashton, to his genuine credit, threw himself into stepfatherhood with a seriousness that surprised many people. He was 27 years old when he took on the responsibility of helping raise 3 girls aged 11, 14, and 17. He attended their school events. He learned how to French braid their hair. He took parenting classes. He helped Rumor set up her first Twitter account. He produced her film. Scout has credited him with inspiring her interest in technology, which eventually led her to study computer science. He was, by all available accounts, a genuinely dedicated presence in their lives. But the marriage itself was fracturing underneath the surface of that family life, and then on September 24, 2011, their 6th wedding anniversary, it broke. Kutcher reportedly spent that night with a 22-year-old woman named Sarah Leal. Demi learned about it through a Google alert on her phone while she was getting ready for a red carpet event. She confronted him. He admitted it. She later discovered there had been at least one other woman, a 21-year-old named Brittany Jones. When confronted about the affairs, Kutcher reportedly suggested that their arrangement of allowing others into their relationship had blurred the lines. Demi wrote that this explanation deepened her pain rather than diminishing it. Days after the affair became public, they were required to appear together at a public event for their foundation working against human trafficking. She stood next to him on a stage. She smiled when the situation required it. She has described that experience as one of the most humiliating moments of her life. On November 17, 2011, she announced their separation publicly. The divorce process took nearly 2 years. Ashton filed officially in December 2012. It was finalized in November 2013. Years later, in a 2023 interview, Ashton said that the divorce made him feel like a failure. Demi said in her memoir that its end felt like a nightmare that had dismantled something she had not realized she had built so much of her identity around. The divorce did not just end a marriage, it triggered a collapse that Demi Moore barely survived. She had been sober for nearly 20 years. That sobriety had been her anchor, her most fundamental proof to herself that she could conquer the self-destructive tendencies that had been passed down to her and reinforced by everything she had lived through. When the marriage fell apart, so did the sobriety. On January 23, 2012, at a party at her home in Benedict Canyon, Demi had a seizure. She had been smoking synthetic cannabis and inhaling nitrous oxide. When paramedics arrived, she was described as semi-conscious and shaking. The 911 call became public. The images of her being carried out were everywhere. What the cameras did not capture was what came after. Over the following years, she was taking up to 12 Vicodin pills a day. She was drinking vodka mixed with Red Bull. She was spending hours in front of mirrors, convinced she needed to be thinner, her weight dropping to roughly 100 pounds. Seizures became a recurring reality rather than an isolated incident. She was barely eating. She was completely isolated from friends, from family, from her daughters. She missed Rumor's 30th birthday. She missed Scout's milestones. Her youngest daughter, Tallulah, who was 25 at the time and struggling with her own eating disorder and substance abuse issues, a crisis that Tallulah has publicly connected to the stress of watching her mother disappear, eventually stopped speaking to her entirely. All 3 daughters cut contact. They did not attend her 50th birthday. The silence between them lasted for 3 years. Rumor has spoken publicly about receiving a phone call from someone telling her she needed to call 911 to save her mother's life. Scout has said she felt abandoned and convinced herself that her mother simply did not love her anymore. Tallulah described watching her mother transform into someone unrecognizable, someone she feared, rather than the woman who had always been her anchor, however imperfect. In September 2012, Demi entered rehabilitation at a facility in Utah. It cost roughly $150,000 a month. It was the beginning of a long and non-linear process of pulling herself back from the edge of a life she had nearly destroyed entirely. Recovery for Demi Moore did not look like a single transformative moment. It looked like therapy, consistency, and the slow, painstaking work of repairing relationships that had been fractured by years of absence and pain. The first crack of light came on November 12, 2015, when Tallulah, having just completed her own rehabilitation, reached out to her mother. It was the first contact between them in nearly 3 years. Demi did not wait. She flew to New York immediately. What followed was 18 months of family counseling, a week-long retreat in Arizona in 2017, where the 4 of them, Demi and her 3 daughters, meditated together and did the kind of emotional processing work that cannot be rushed or faked. Long conversations about what the addiction years had really looked like from the outside. Rumor talking about her panic attacks, Scout talking about her anger, Tallulah talking about feeling abandoned. Demi listened. She took responsibility rather than explaining or deflecting. She kept showing up to the hard conversations even when they required her to sit inside her own failures without flinching. On her 60th birthday in 2022, her 3 daughters surprised her with matching tattoos. They had the word mother tattooed on their bodies in Demi's own handwriting. It is difficult to think of a more precise image of what forgiveness, when it is real and hard-won, actually looks like. Her relationship with Bruce Willis has also remained a source of genuine warmth through all of it. When his family announced in 2022 that he had been diagnosed with aphasia, a condition affecting his ability to communicate, Demi was among the first to publicly share the news and offer her support. She has spent time with him and his wife Emma Hemming Willis since then. She attended his 68th birthday celebration in 2023 and posted a video of everyone singing together that spread across the internet, not because it was scandalous, but because it was quietly beautiful. A family that had been broken and rebuilt, celebrating together. And then there is the detail that has surprised perhaps more people than any other. Demi Moore and Mila Kunis, Ashton Kutcher's wife, are friends. Real friends. They have a book club. They meet every 2 weeks to talk about what they are reading and what is happening in their lives. The woman who was once the betrayed ex-wife, and the woman who married the man who did the betraying, sitting together over books and conversation, choosing to build something constructive rather than carrying the weight of the story the world wrote for them. In 2024, Demi Moore turned 62. She sat down with Vogue and said something that stopped the conversation entirely. The most important relationship in her life, she explained, is the one she has with herself. She was not performing contentment. She was not offering the kind of reflective wisdom that celebrities sometimes deploy as a shield against further questions. She meant it in the most concrete, practical sense. She had spent most of her life seeking wholeness through other people, through her mother's approval, through her marriages, through her children's need for her, through her career's ability to confirm that she mattered. And she had learned, at enormous personal cost, that none of those external sources could give her the thing she was actually looking for. She coined a phrase for the approach she has settled into: solo partnering. It means, in her definition, that she is focused on her own growth and happiness as the primary relationship in her life. She is not looking for romantic partnership. She is not close to it either, but she no longer feels incomplete without it. And that distinction between not wanting something and not needing it is the whole difference. The phrase spread online almost immediately after the interview. The hashtag was trending within hours. Something in it clearly resonated with people far beyond the specifics of Demi Moore's biography. In the past year, she has gone on exactly 3 dates by her own account. One of them was with an astrophysicist she met at a TED Talk. They went stargazing in the Mojave Desert. She said it was not romantic, but that it was one of the most genuinely meaningful evenings she could remember. A reminder that connection does not have to come wrapped in the expectation of love to be worth having. She has spoken about what she wants, if she does eventually fall in love again. Not someone who fills a gap. Not someone whose presence papers over an absence inside her. Someone who adds to a life that she has already built to be full. Someone who is an addition rather than a foundation. That distinction took her 40 years and a great deal of suffering to arrive at. But she arrived at it, and at 62 she is, by her own testimony and by every visible measure, genuinely at peace with herself, in a way that the girl born in Roswell, New Mexico, who found her mother's pills at the age of 12 and decided that survival was what she was here to do, that girl could probably not have imagined. The story of Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher was never really about an age gap. It was never really about a cougar, or a punk star, or a Hollywood scandal that made for easy late-night jokes. It was about a woman who had been searching for safety and belonging her entire life, who found in a charming 25-year-old man the temporary feeling of having found it, and who lost herself in the process of trying to keep it. The years that followed that loss were the hardest of her life. The addiction, the seizures, the estrangement from her daughters, the long, slow work of climbing back. But here's what is also true. She did the climbing. She made the calls, sat through the hard conversations, got on the planes, went to the retreats, showed up for her children even when showing up meant accepting their anger without deflecting it. She did the work, and the work produced something real. At 62, Demi Moore is not a cautionary tale. She is not a comeback story either. That framing is too small for what she has actually done. She is a woman who came from almost nothing, built something extraordinary, lost much of it, and rebuilt herself on a foundation that nothing can take away the understanding that she is enough, exactly as she is, without needing anyone to confirm it. That is the story she finally wanted to tell, and now you have heard it.